Let's build a computer. I think if you can't build a computer by the end of this video, we're both dumb. Let's make this simple. Start with your motherboard. The idea is to build everything in the motherboard that we can first. With storage, we're using an NVMe drive. This motherboard has 4 slots for NVMe. Nowadays, a lot of motherboards have thermal pads covering their NVMes. Make sure you remove the plastic that is covering that. Now that storage is out of the way, we're going to move on to RAM. RAM just clicks in. It's super simple. One thing you want to worry about, making sure that your RAM is 4 Intel or 4 AMD, depending upon which processor you're going to be using. Of course, making sure you have the correct DDR for your platform. Next is the CPU. Just be very, very, very careful not to bend any pins when installing the CPU. Of course, make sure your socket matches your CPU and your motherboard. That would be LGA or AM, AM3, AM4, AM5, or LGA 1700, 1151, yada yada yada. You'll have a bag or a box of hardware inside of your case. Make sure you get that and check to see if you have any standoffs missing. We have 3 standoffs missing. I like to just mock up the motherboard and see if there are any missing under the motherboard. These are these little pegs that you put in the motherboard that you screw the motherboard in with. They go under the board. You're going to use an iFixit screwdriver to screw those in, or really anything that works. Now we can actually mount the motherboard. We're going to look for the correct screw. The correct screw typically has that little lip around it. Now we're going to screw in the motherboard. Next is the graphics card. This is an RTX 4060. It is kind of on the more budget side of graphics cards, but this lady is literally going to be playing The Sims. So until The Sims 6 comes out, I think she'll be fine. Graphics cards come covered in all of this plastic, and you're going to have to remove brackets, so make sure you remove the correct brackets and all of that plastic. Make sure you mount that very nicely, not to bend the PCIe slot, and then screw that guy in. Make sure it's nice and stable. Now we're going to open up the back of the computer and do some more work. Set aside all of these cables, maybe manage them a little bit. Those are all of your case cables. Here is the power supply. Power supply, a lot of people think is really confusing. It's not. One tip is, do not mix modular cables. If you bought a new power supply and it is also modular, do not mix your cables. We'll go boom. And also, if it fits, it sits, pretty much. You run all of your cables where you want them to go, plug in that little hub for the LEDs, and then shove everything where it can't be seen. Next, we'll plug in all of the cables for the front panel. Again, if it fits, it sits. Making sure that graphics card gets power. And now for the CPU cooler. The CPU cooler is actually my least favorite part of building any computer. Typically just really annoying to mount. This is a Corsair liquid cooler, and thankfully they made it a little bit easier for us to mount because they have this little sticky bracket that goes behind here and it stays. Typically you have to hold that with one hand while trying to mount these little pegs here, and now it has pre-installed thermal paste. We just put that guy right on there with the thumb screws. This is really just about some coordination, honestly. Make sure that the cooler gets mounted correctly, and then you make sure that the radiator gets mounted correctly, and you're all good, pretty much. Just screw everything in, make sure everything gets plugged in. Once again, if it fits, it sits. This particular cooler came with a splitter for all of these wires, so we put all of the fans into the CPU fan header so that it will control the speed based on CPU temperature. Now we're just going to go ahead and clean up all these cables, put all of the LEDs plugged into the motherboard. Then one final trick I have for, customer computers is when putting this plastic back, or the glass back on, I put the bolts under the plastic so that the customer doesn't, have to worry about touching it, bringing it home, and then they don't have to worry about putting the bolts off and back on to get the plastic off. Anyway, this is what it looks like. It's all done. And if this helped you build a computer, let me know in the comments. Bye!